occurred between August 15 to the 28th. The Okta Research Group projects less than 1,000 daily cases in the country by September as indicators like the 7-day average of new cases and reproduction numbers decline. In a post, Okta says Metro Manila's positivity rate dipped from 14.6% in August 20 to 12.9% on August 27. The group adds nearly all provinces in Luzon had a decrease in positivity rate, but the rate is very high in Albay, Cagayan, Camarines Sur, Isabela, La Union, Nueva Ecija, and Tarlac. The DOH earlier said the daily cases may spike to 9,000 a day by the end of September up to October as more students head back to their physical classrooms. The Commission on Higher Education removes the full COVID-19 vaccination requirement. That means students, along with teaching and non-teaching personnel, can now participate in face-to-face classes regardless of vaccination status. CHED cites several considerations in updating the guidelines for in-person classes.
We are changing it because vaccination levels are already high in higher education institutions. The percentage of the at-risk individuals is significantly lower now and therefore easier to control on the part of our HAIs. And just like in other countries which has taken out the vaccination requirements, we can already learn on how other countries have been doing it and apply it in the country.
No specific date yet is set to start another round of campus-based vaccination, which targets unvaccinated students and personnel. The country has recorded more cases of common diseases during the rainy season this year in 2021. Leptospirosis and dengue are on top of the list, but there are also more people affected by food and waterborne diseases like typhoid fever. Caroline Bonkin gives us a rundown.
Angelo Ferrer's vegetable stall is just near a river in Tuguegarao City. He has no choice but to wade through flood during heavy rain.
Tumutulong pa ako sa paninda namin para hindi pong masira. Hindi naman ako natatakot magkasakit. Sabay maligo ng pagkatapos na po.
One of the main causes of higher number of rainy season diseases this year, flooding. 11 leptospirosis cases were reported on the first week of August alone. While it's lower compared to the same period last year, the overall leptospirosis cases from January 1 to August 6 is higher by 22% than in 2021. Death toll has reached 188. Metro Manila, Western Visayas, and Cagayan Valley have the most leptospirosis cases. It's a bacterial disease that could affect internal organs, but it's preventable.
Leptospirosis affects our kidneys and other organs. So kapag late na po tayo nagpakonsulta, maaring yung impeksyon ay kumalat na. Kaya nagkakaroon ng pagkaka-ospital, kailangan pang magdialysis yung iba dahil nasisira na ng husto ang kidney.
Health officials advise against wading in flood, but if you have no choice, either wear boots or cover your feet with plastic.
Pagdating sa bahay, ugasang maigi ang paa. Kung meron kayong sugat sa paa, pumunta na po kayo agad sa inyong health center para mabigyan kayo ng post-exposure prophylaxis.
She says water service interruptions this rainy season also cause food and waterborne diseases. Cases of typhoid fever this year more than doubled from that of last year. There are also more patients with acute bloody diarrhea and acute viral hepatitis. Rotavirus and cholera cases have more than doubled as well.
Napuputulan ng tubig yung iba, may disruption sa water services, so they look for optional na para makakuha sila ng tubig, and sometimes madumi yung tubig kaya nagkakaroon ng ganitong mga insidente.
Dengue infections also filling hospitals with over 18,000 people admitted nationwide. Dengue death toll has reached 399 on August 6th, and overall cases since January more than 118,000. Nearly 30,000 got infected in the past month alone. There are also 374 cases of chikungunya, another mosquito-borne disease. That's nearly 6 times the cases last year.
Pag tayo ay nagpakonsulta na mas maaga, may iiwasan natin ang pagkaka-ospital at pagkakaroon ng komplikasyon ng dengue.
Now that millions of students are back to school, health officials are reminding teachers and administrators keep the schools clean and destroy mosquito breeding grounds to avoid dengue and chikungunya cases. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
More stories up ahead on National Heroes Day. President Marcos recognizes the country's modern-day heroes. And the Social Welfare Department notes an improved distribution of cash aid to students, though some areas still experiencing difficulties. Keep it here on Newsnight. Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Today, the country honors its heroes either through visits to historical sites or recognition for war veterans. Chrissy Di Matulak tells us about National Heroes Day.
Engineer Bonifacio Panelo is a former sailor from the Philippine Navy. During his time with the Navy, Panelo admits that it was not easy being away from his family. But he says he has no regrets because it was his call of duty.
Lahat ng klase ng paghihirap, pagsasakripisyo nandun na.
Instead of taking this holiday as an opportunity to rest, Ronel Soberano and his fellow teachers visited Fort Santiago, the oldest Spanish fort in the country, which has witnessed many historical events.
Tuturo namin sa mga bata yung guro kami sa Cavite. So para yung mga kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, maituro namin sa mga bata kasi nakalimutan na ng mga bata yung kasaysayan natin.
People like Bonifacio and Ronel are considered modern-day heroes who go above and beyond their mandate to help others. According to historian Xiao Chua, times may have changed, but a true hero is one who makes sacrifices without expecting anything in return.
For the people, bahagi siya nung pagbubuo ng bansa. Oh? So like Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio, they were part of the birth of the nation. Sina Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and then yung mga nagsakripisyo. We also have the ordinary bayani, yung mga OFW, halimbawa, yung mga guro natin, yung they who go beyond their call of duty to do what to do something for their country.
During his speech at the Libingan ng mga Bayani, President Bongbong Marcos recognized everyday Filipinos like farmers, teachers, doctors, and men and women in uniform. He also announced that there will be more healthcare facilities for the veterans who served the country during wartime.
Makakaasa kayo na ang pamahalang ito ay mananatiling aktibo sa pagsusulong ng mga programang tutugon sa inyong mga pangangailangan, lalo na para sa kanilang mga rekisitong pagkalusugan.
In her message to the public, Vice President Sara Duterte honored those who have dedicated their lives to rebuilding the nation from conflict caused by disunity, hatred, and misunderstanding. Chrissy Di Matulak, CNN Philippines.
Close to 80,000 indigent students received financial aid amounting to over 175 million pesos during the second week of education assistance distribution. Despite falling short of the initial target of 90,000, the Social Welfare Department is pleased with the improved payout. Paige Javier has the scenes from last weekend.
It was a complete turnaround on the second weekend of the Social Welfare Department's payout of educational assistance for students in crisis. After multiple incidents of large crowds and people pushing each other on day one, distribution was more orderly through more efficient systems and organized lines of beneficiaries.
Malaki po yung improvement compared po dun sa naging payout natin last Saturday. Ganito rin po yung ating assessment sa buong bansa.
Interior Secretary Benher Abalos made the rounds in Metro Manila payout centers, praising the teamwork with local governments. To avoid a repeat of the overcrowding last Saturday, walk-ins were no longer allowed in the over 200 sites nationwide. But there are some who still tried their luck.
Isa po ako single mom. So kailangan po namin ng sana na konting tulong na ganyan. Nagbakasakali lang po. Pangalawa, ganun din uli. Parang olats ba?
DSWD officers check if applicants have a text message with a payout schedule. If they have one, they may fall in line. But if they don't or need verification, they will be directed to the help desk. After lining up and getting interviewed, beneficiaries will get between 1,000 to 4,000 pesos in cash. Face masks could not hide the joy of those who received aid.
Wala po yung pagod ko. Lahat po ng hirap po ng mga sasakay po. Basta hawak ko na po.
Hirap po namin yung Saturday. Ngayon po, nakuha po namin. Mas mabilis na po yung processor ngayon.
The Sampaloc Field Office got creative to keep those waiting in line at bay. Aside from karaoke, they also held a movie marathon. It was a different situation in some areas outside the metro. Several were injured as thousands were pushing and shoving in Odyongan, Romblon. The DSWD said the situation was resolved by the field office and LGU. Payout was also halted in Buwak, Marinduque following the growing number of walk-ins. The DSWD called this incident an isolated case. The agency is finalizing the guidelines for those who do not have internet access or gadgets to apply online. It appeals for patience for the payout schedules amid an influx of applications. DSWD says they have enough funds to give aid until September 24.
Ang panawagan lang natin sa ating mga kababayan, talagang intayin na magkaroon ng text confirmation at doon kung saan sila papupuntahin at kailan para maiwasan na po ang siksikan.
Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
Detained former Senator Laila de Lima describes as regrettable the Philippine National Police's move to bar visitors from seeing her on her birthday Saturday. De Lima said police resorted to strict technicality when it cited the 10-day period for submitting requests as the reason why only her immediate family members were allowed to visit. De Lima admitted that her staff filed a request only a few days prior, but explained that she was still waiting for some of her guests to confirm. She said there were a few times she failed to comply with the PNP's 10-day period, but these were favorably acted upon. PNP said it only followed protocol. Close to a dozen personalities, which include former lawmakers and officials, were informed they could not visit De Lima 2 hours before their scheduled arrival. Last Saturday marked her 6th year in detention over drug charges that human rights advocates see as politically motivated. Overseas, the United States sends 2 warships through the Taiwan Strait, Washington's first naval transit in the waterway since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to Taipei. The guided missile cruisers transited the East China Sea and Taiwan Strait during routine operations Sunday. The U.S. 7th Fleet insisted that its military will sail, fly, and operate wherever international law allows them to, as China claims the strait is part of its waters. In response, Beijing's military said it was monitoring the 2 ships and signaled its preparedness to, quote, thwart any provocation. Less than 2 hours from now, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration is set to launch another mission to the moon. Here's CNN Space and Defense correspondent Kristen Fisher.
It's been a long time since NASA's had its own candle to light.
Liftoff.
11 years since the last space shuttle launch. 50 years since the last launch of the Apollo program.
The Challenger has landed.
But now, Apollo's mythological twin sister, Artemis, is on the launch pad and ready to fly.
To all of us that gaze up at the moon, dreaming of the day humankind returns to the lunar surface, folks, we're here.
The Artemis rocket, or SLS, is years behind schedule, billions over budget. But it's also the most powerful rocket ever built, and it's designed to launch people even deeper into space than the moon.
Our sights are not set on the moon. Our sights are set clearly on Mars.
But first, it has to pass this uncrewed test flight with only mannequins on board. Artemis 1 will launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, but mission control is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
This is Apollo Control, Houston.
The same place that controlled every Apollo and shuttle mission.
This is where it all happens as far as human spaceflight.
Rick LeBrode is in charge of it all as lead flight director. LeBrode and his team have been training in this room for this moment for over 3 years.
When flight day comes, it's a whole different ballgame. It's when it really gets real.
After launch, the SLS rocket will separate from the Orion crew capsule on top. Orion will then fly 250,000 miles to the moon and then go 40,000 miles beyond it, farther than any spacecraft designed to carry humans has ever flown.
We're going to swing by the moon, and when we swing by it on the way there, we're going to be 60 miles off the surface. It's going to be incredible. The pictures we get as we go by are going to be really impressive.
After orbiting the moon for more than 2 weeks, Orion will head back to Earth, hitting speeds of around 25,000 miles per hour and temperatures half the surface of the sun, something engineers can't replicate here on Earth.
The number one highest priority for our mission is actually to test the heat shield.
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia.
It was a damaged heat shield that caused Space Shuttle Columbia to burn up on re-entry, killing 7 astronauts. So testing it before astronauts fly on Artemis 2 is crucial.
For me, Artemis 1 is exciting, but it's really a stepping stone, a milestone to getting humans back in the vicinity of the moon, and that is awesome.
Victor Glover is one of more than 40 astronauts in the running to fly on Artemis 2 and Artemis 3, which will land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon.
We explore for all people, but now we can actually say we explore with all people.
CNN Space and Defense correspondent Christine Fisher with that report. Up next on Newsnight, a revamped Gilas is raring to bounce back against Saudi Arabia tonight on home soil. And Blackpink's Lisa scores a historic win at the MTV Video Music Awards. You're watching CNN Philippines. Welcome back. Sports news now. 3 medals in 3 international events for pole vaulter EJ Obiena, all within 5 days. The men's pole vault world number 3 ruled the True Athletes Classic in Leverkusen, Germany over the weekend. Obiena cleared 5.81 meters. He kicked off the second part of his season with a gold medal in Joachim, Germany, followed by a bronze at the Atletissima in Switzerland. The national volleyball team caps off the ABC Cup for Women event at 6th place after being swept by Chinese Taipei today at the Phil Sports Arena in Pasig. It was still a historic tournament, with the country achieving its best finish in the AVC. In the PBA Philippine Cup Finals, a massive comeback win from TNT Tropang Giga after back-to-back losses to the San Miguel Beermen. TNT dominated San Miguel 100-87, tying the series at 2 each at the Araneta Coliseum in Quezon City. Before the game, Junmar Fajardo grabbed his 9th Best Player of the Conference award, his 7th for the Philippine Cup, but Fajardo says his eyes are on another trophy.
Pero hindi yun yung goal ko, hindi yun yung goal ko para sa team. Yung goal ko talaga yung championships. May 2 araw kami na para mag-practice, para mag-regroup. Tingnan namin kung ano yung pwede namin i-adjust sa game.
In less than an hour, Gilas Pilipinas and Saudi Arabia will go head-to-head for the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers right here at home. The match begins at 7 at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay. But it looks like Gilas can count on NBA star Jordan Clarkson for more games ahead. The Filipino-American athlete affirmed his commitment to the team for next year's FIBA World Cup in a visit to the tenement in Taguig City yesterday. Liza Soberano is living her Hollywood dream as she will soon make her debut on the international movie scene. The Filipino-American actress has started filming in the U.S. for her first Hollywood movie, Lisa Frankenstein. The movie features American actors Cole Sprouse and Catherine Newton. In the program New Day, Liza gave us a few details about her new exciting movie.
Lisa Frankenstein is a romantic horror comedy. It's like a mash of like 3 different genres put into one, and it's so much fun because it's written by Diablo Cody, and she's made some of like the best movies in history, like Juno and Jennifer's Body.
Exciting news for Blinks as Blackpink's Lisa won the Best K-pop award at this year's VMAs for her song La Lisa. The 2022 MTV Video Music Awards was held at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, with LL Cool J and Nicki Minaj as hosts. Doja Cat, Jack Harlow, and Harry Styles were this year's biggest winners, with the trio landing 8 awards apiece. Close behind were Billie Eilish, Drake, Dua Lipa, Ed Sheeran, and The Weeknd. Taylor Swift, upon receiving the final award of the night, made a big announcement about her new album. Swift, who won Best Long-Form Video and Video of the Year for All Too Well 10-minute version, announced her upcoming album Midnights, 13 Sleepless Nights Scattered Throughout Life, which drops on October 21st. And that is it for tonight. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
One of the most pressing health problems in the country and around the world is hepatitis. In fact, around 1 in 10 Filipinos have chronic hepatitis B and 6 in 1,000 have chronic hepatitis C. On the program today, we'll talk more about the different types of hepatitis commonly seen here in the Philippines and how they affect Filipinos and what we can do to stop it from progressing. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Hepatitis occurs when there is an inflammation of the liver. So your liver is your organ responsible for processing many things, such as nutrients, filtering blood, fighting infections, are just a few of them. Now our guests are here today to tell us more about this condition. With us is Dr. Edel Tripon. She's a hepatologist from the Medical City. We're also joined by Dr. Ruter Moralit, who is a gastroenterologist from the University of the Philippines, PGH, and the Medical City as well. Thank you both for joining us on this program. I'll start the discussion with Dr. Edel. Tell us more about this condition. Why is hepatitis primarily affecting our liver?
There are many causes of liver inflammation, and it can be an infection. That's our main topic today, and those are the known viruses for hepatitis. But it can also be secondary to toxins that we intake, namely alcohol and even some drugs or even supplements that can lead to liver inflammation and liver injury.
Dr. Edel, why is hepatitis so prevalent here in the Philippines?
You're right, Freddie. So we're talking about viral hepatitis. We say it's the ABCs of hepatitis. The hepatitis A, which is the food and waterborne hepatitis, is pretty common in third world countries. The other form of hepatitis that's very common in the Philippines and a bigger public health issue actually is hepatitis B. And it's very common in the Philippines because we're one of the top 10 countries in the world that has it, and that includes adult and even in children 5 and below. And this is because this kind of hepatitis is an infection that's transmitted from mother to child at birth. And so if we don't address the adults and anytime that we drag back or lay low in our infant immunization rates, then we prevent the country from decreasing our cases.
Doc Ruter, let's start with hepatitis A. Let's talk about it. What are some of the more common symptoms, and how is this mainly acquired?
Hepatitis A, as Edel mentioned, is a foodborne or waterborne viral hepatitis. So this is the one that nakukuha natin sa pagkain na madumi or hindi malinis na tubig. Main symptoms is usually nilalagnat, sumasakit ang tiyan, nauseated or nasusuka, sometimes may vomiting and bloatedness, and then eventually they develop jaundice o yung paninilaw.
Ngayon, how about food poisoning? Can someone get mistake food poisoning with Hepa A?
Yes, kasi sometimes hepatitis A does not present with jaundice, and symptoms of intestinal flu or yung kanyang pagtatae is very similar to hepatitis A. So unfortunately, unless magpa-test ka at nag-jaundice ka, hindi mo malalaman na hepatitis A pala yung nakuha mo.
Now, Dr. Edel, let's talk about hepatitis B. First, let's compare it with what Dr. Ruter just mentioned about hepatitis A. Let's compare that because they talk about hepatitis A as a self-limiting, an acute event, while hepatitis B has the risk of being chronic. Please explain that to our viewers.
When you say kasi someone has acute hepatitis, that means that you've been carrying the virus for less than 6 months. So in patients who get infected with the viruses that can become chronic, and when you say chronic, meaning you can carry it in your body and in your system for more than 6 months to the rest of your life. And we say that once you have proven hepatitis B or C for more than 6 months, that you are someone with chronic infection, because the likelihood that you will get cured or lose the infection is less. So once you have it for over 6 months, most likely you will be carrying this infection for years until the rest of your life even.
That's right. So if it's something that can be there for the rest of your life, we definitely have to talk more about that after the break, because when we return, we'll go through some of the causes as well as more of the symptoms so we can best prevent and manage this illness. So we're your partner in healthcare, so keep it here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. We're talking about hepatitis, and it continues to be a public health concern here in our country. But many of the cases can actually be prevented through proper care. Now, understanding its causes and its warning signs is the first step. Dr. Ruter, earlier we talked about the main cause for hepatitis A is fecal-oral. How about hepatitis B?
So hepatitis B is mainly from mother to children. It's vertical transmission yung tinatawag namin. So hindi siya namamana, it's naipapasa. So galing siya sa mommy, pagdaan nila sa puwerta, either via cesarean or via normal delivery, na ipapasa ni mommy yung virus to the baby. And if the baby is not vaccinated within 12 hours nung passive and nung active immunization, pwedeng makuha ni baby yon for life. So that's why it's very important, sabi ni Dr. Tripon, that the immunization among children below 5 years old, especially with carriers na mommy, dapat magawa within 12 hours yung first doses.
So definitely vaccination is important. But my question for Dr. Edel, for hepatitis B, is it possible to have hepatitis B and not have any symptoms? Hindi alam ng tao na may hepatitis B na pala siya.
Yes, it's possible. So in the Philippines, the estimates is that we have 10% of our general population that has hepatitis B. And that in the time that the study was done, our population was about 100 million. So this translates to about 10 million Filipinos who have hepatitis B, and that percentage is higher in adults. So the estimate in 2003 when they did a study, about 17% of adults.
So Dr. Reuter mentioned that one of the main reasons for them for hepatitis B to be transferred is from the mother to the child. What are some other ways that are common here in the Philippines ang pag-transmit ng hepatitis B, Dr. Edel?
So other ways, the younger you get exposed, the higher the chance that you will become chronic or have the chronic infection. So things that will cause the blood of someone who has hepatitis B to enter your system, and that will include, say, sharing manicure, pedicure instruments, sharing razors, and I've seen acute hepatitis B individuals in those that are exposed to razors that are reused, blades that are reused from barber shops. There are documented cases from transmission from Ventosa, where they use suction cups for massage. And sometimes because of the vigorousness of the pressure and the suction pressure, there is some blood. And if, for example, that glass that they use is used on another person, then that can be a way to transmit the disease. Previously, if you got blood transfusion in the 80s or maybe even early 90s, because it was around that time that we started to screen organized blood banks for hepatitis B and C, then you may also have had the infection in that manner. So very old women, sometimes I see that those are the sources of infection. Say they gave birth in the 70s and had transfusion during their delivery of their baby, and we would trace back as a source of the infection, that mode of transmission.
So we've been talking about hepatitis B. There's so many mundane things that our viewers may not be aware of na pwede palang makuhang hepatitis B dito. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Reuter, how bad can it get? Earlier we mentioned that it can be a chronic illness. It can be there for lifelong. Nakamamatay ba ang hepatitis B?
When you got the infection quite early, the chances of you having the chronic disease is quite longer and higher. So the problem is you develop the complications of hepatitis B, which is in the Philippines, we do see patients who have cirrhosis and eventually die of liver cancer. So that's the most dreaded disease condition that can be a complication of hepatitis B. So yes, nakamamatay ang hepatitis B, especially if the virus becomes active later in the years of your life.
Doc Reuter, how about hepatitis A? Pwede bang mamatay ang isang tao kapag meron siyang hepatitis A?
Yes, but it's very uncommon. We have a condition called fulminant hepatitis A. So fulminant hepatitis A, there's a severe inflammation of the liver trying to clear out the virus. Unfortunately, these patients, when they do have fulminant hepatitis A, they can die. But bihira naman, awa ng Diyos. So that's why vaccination is key for hepatitis A.
Dr. Edel, please enlighten us on hepatitis C and how different is it from the other types of hepatitis?
So hepatitis C, the same as hepatitis B. So what I try to remind people is that the consonants B and C are the ones that become chronic, and they are the same in that they are the ones that are blood and body fluid borne. So hepatitis C is less common in the Philippines. It has the same mode of transmission. You can get it through sexual contact, same as hepatitis B. You can get it through sharing contaminated instruments. Very commonly, we can find this in IV drug users, especially if they share needles, even in contaminated tattoo instruments. So it's very important to ask your tattoo provider that they're using new and sterile needles.
Dr. Del, before we pause to break, how is hepatitis diagnosed? What are the ways in which doctors perform to get the proper diagnosis, and which type of hepatitis they have?
So it's very easy. It's a simple blood test. Some of these tests are point-of-care tests, wherein you will get your results after they get a drop of blood, and you'll get the results in like maybe within 30 minutes. In the same way, for A and B, which has vaccines, you can get tests if you already are immune, meaning if you already have the antibody and if you still need to be vaccinated.
Now that you've been properly diagnosed with hepatitis and whatever type it is, what do you do now? That's what we will talk about when Men Talk Health Talk returns. So keep it here, only on CNN Philippines. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk. Today, we're talking about hepatitis, which is a public health concern here in the Philippines. We can take action against this disease with proper awareness, number one, testing for that, as well as the correct management. Now, Dr. Reuter, let's talk about that. When it comes to managing hepatitis, you mentioned about vaccines. What vaccine should they take? When should they be taking those vaccines?
So we have three viral hepatitis that are common in the Philippines, A, B, and C. And unfortunately, wala tayong vaccine for hepatitis C. But fortunately, we have vaccines for hepatitis A and hepatitis B. So you can take them separately or even in combination. So usually, hepatitis B is being given immediately during the first 6 months of life. And it's given 3 doses. Hepatitis A naman, usually during the school age or preschool age, we also give hepatitis A to protect these patients from acquiring those infections. And these hepatitis A and hepatitis B vaccines provide lifelong protection. So once it's given and they develop the antibodies, the protection that it provides is lifelong.
Now, Dr. Reuter, for someone who already was diagnosed to have hepatitis B and has hepatitis B chronically, do they still, will taking the vaccine be any benefit for them?
So unfortunately, it would not protect them anymore because they have the virus already, and the vaccine is not capable of clearing the virus once you develop the chronic hepatitis B. So unfortunately, for some of our countrymen, nag-develop na ng hepatitis B na chronic, hindi na po kayo magbe-benefit sa vaccination.
Okay, so it's very important to be able to prevent this and taking that vaccine early on, as what Dr. Reuter mentioned, and take the corresponding doses as well. Dr. Edel, I want to talk about some of the practical effects of being diagnosed with hepatitis B. You mentioned that this has a possibility, although not always, to be a chronic disease. If there is a vaccine for hepatitis A and B, how about those with hepatitis C? What are their options now?
If we're talking about those that are infected already, now is in the past decade, there has been huge leaps in the advances for treatment of hepatitis C. There are now available tablets that can be given to you. If you have a hepatitis C infection, you need to be viremic to be eligible for these tablets, meaning the PCR test should show that you have active hepatitis C replication in your body. And if diagnosed, there are tablets that can be given to you. And usually the treatment just lasts 3 months to 6 months, depending on the stage of your liver disease. And treatment is generally 95% to over 95% effective.
Now, when it comes to testing, Dr. Edel, how important is it to know if your partner, potential partner, has chronic hepatitis B or not?
Well, for chronic hepatitis B, it's important because in the Philippines, because it's so prevalent, we can actually go out and say anyone who is Filipino should have been tested for hepatitis B at least once in their life and be vaccinated if they are not yet immune. And that is because it's a vaccine-preventable disease. And actually, the Philippines has a program wherein all infants, and Dr. Ruther mentioned about vaccination for hepatitis B. This vaccination, the birth dose, is free from the expanded program of immunization, and is also free under the PhilHealth Maternal Care and Newborn Package, so that your child at 1 year of life has completed the vaccination against Hep B, and that should protect them against infection for life. Just vaccination and the giving of the immune globulin can actually decrease the transmission from a positive hepatitis B pregnant mother to her child by less than 10%. And ineligible mothers, if your viral load, so if you see your OB and your Hep B positive, there is actually available tablets that can be given from the 28th week of pregnancy. So this is the 3rd trimester to further decrease infection from mother to child to 0.
Now, Dr. Ruther, aside from the vaccine against hepatitis A and B, what are some other ways that our viewers can protect themselves, be more conscious that hepatitis B is around?
Avoiding sharing of sharp objects, making sure that you practice monogamous relationships. And if you are not practicing monogamous relationship, use barrier protections like condoms. These are the things that you can do to prevent transmission of hepatitis B through various means. So unfortunately, the mother to daughter is only protected by vaccination. But for adults who have chronic hepatitis B friends and colleagues, or those who are practicing sexual intercourse, then practice safe sex.
Now, we all have a role to play in protecting against hepatitis and other diseases as well. So let's take the steps needed in order to prevent it from catching it. Thank you so much, Dr. Adele Tripon and Dr. Ruther Moralit, for sharing your information. We all know a little bit more about hepatitis now, which is the most important thing. So we appreciate your time and your insights very much. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time here on MedTalk Health Talk.